I have nothing new to teach the world. Truth and non-violence are as old as hills. Mahatma Gandhi's aim in writing this autobiography was to give an account of his spiritual progress towards truth. Absolute truth is his sovereign principle and non-violence the method of pursuing it. In politics, it meant freedom from foreign domination. Within Hindu society, it was the breaking down of barriers raised by caste and custom. In society, it was living close to nature. Written in 1925 under the title The Story of My Experiments with Truth, his work describes the practical application of his beliefs. The implementation of his doctrine, Gandhi believed, would result in a loose federation of village republics, freed forever from British control and influence. Gandhi succeeded in uniting India in a national movement and did as much in the first half of the 20th century as any other single individual to change the course of history. His early life described vividly and meticulously Percival Spear in A History of India. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, the great Indian political leader and social reformer, was born in 1869 at Porbandar in western India. In 1888, he went to London to study law, qualifying in 1891. There he first encountered liberal and Christian ideas and the teachings of Tolstoy. Returning to India, he practiced law there until 1893 when he left for South Africa. His experience of racialism in South Africa led him to take up the rights of the Indian community, and he soon emerged as their leader. He instituted a campaign of passive resistance in response to the Transvaal government's discriminatory policy, coining the term Satyagraha, truth force, for this new revolutionary technique. This method of resistance was later used to great effect in India's struggle for independence. Gandhi returned to India in 1915, and in 1925 he became president of the Indian National Congress. His first major clash with the British government came in 1919 over the Rowlatt Act, and he then introduced the Hartal, a strike during which the people devoted themselves to prayer and fasting. However, when his policies resulted in violence, he abandoned the program of mass civil disobedience. For a period, Gandhi withdrew from politics and traveled throughout India preaching the cardinal tenets of his doctrine, Hindu-Muslim unity, the abolition of untouchability and the promotion of hand spinning. He adopted the peasant's homespun cotton dhoti and shawl, a gesture which won the people's hearts, and he became known as Mahatma the Great Soul. During the struggle for independence, he was imprisoned many times, and this, together with his use of the hunger strike, adversely affected his health. In 1934, he resigned his leadership of the Congress, although he still remained a powerful influence. He resumed the leadership for a short time in 1941. Gandhi continued to campaign against partition, which he saw as an unmitigated evil until he realized its inevitability. However, on Independence Day, 15 August 1947, he refused to celebrate and spent the day fasting and in prayer. He persevered in his work for unity, and in 1948 in Delhi he undertook a fast to the death for peace between the two warring communities. But his pleadings for cooperation had aroused hostility amongst the militant section of the Hindus, and on 30 January 1948, one of them shot Gandhi dead. There are many divergent views about Gandhi's personality and his methods. Perhaps his most important contribution to India's struggle for independence was his spiritual leadership and his consequent influence over the mass of India's population. All his life he held to two fundamental principles: a belief in ahimsa or nonviolence and the concept of satya or truth. As he said, "My uniform experience has convinced me that there is no other God than truth. And if every page of these chapters does not proclaim to the reader that the only means for the realization of truth is ahimsa, I shall deem all my labor to have been in vain." Translated from the original Gujarati by Mahadev Desai. Truth is the sovereign principle which includes numerous other principles. This truth is not only truthfulness in word, but truthfulness in thought also, and not only the relative truth of our conception, but the absolute truth, the eternal principle, that is God. The instruments for the quest of truth are as simple as they are difficult. They may appear quite impossible to an arrogant person and quite possible to an innocent child. The seeker after truth should be humbler than the dust. The world crushes the dust under its feet, but the seeker after truth should so humble himself that even the dust could crush him. Only then, and not till then, will he have a glimpse of truth. The dialogue between Vasishtha and Vishwamitra makes this abundantly clear. Saptapadi are 7 steps a Hindu bride and bridegroom walk together, making at the same time promises of mutual fidelity and devotion, after which the marriage becomes irrevocable. Only he who is smitten with the arrows of love knows its power. For a bowl of water, give a goodly meal. For a kindly greeting, bow thou down with zeal. For a simple penny, pay thou back with gold. If thy life be rescued, life do not withhold. Thus the words and actions of the wise regard. Every little service tenfold they reward. But the truly noble know all men as one, and return with gladness good for evil done. Howard Williams' The Ethics of Diet was a biographical history of the literature of humane dietetics from the earliest period to the present day. It tried to make out that all philosophers and prophets, from Pythagoras and Jesus down to those of the present age, were vegetarians. Dr. Anna Kingsford's The Perfect Way in Diet was also an attractive book. Dr. Allinson's writings on health and hygiene were likewise very helpful. He advocated a curative system based on regulation of the dietary of patients. Himself a vegetarian, he prescribed for his patients also a strictly vegetarian diet. The writers on vegetarianism had examined the question very minutely, attacking it in its religious, scientific, practical, and medical aspects. Ethically, they had arrived at the conclusion that man's supremacy over the lower animals meant not that the former should prey upon the latter, but that the higher should protect the lower, and that there should be mutual aid between the two as between man and man. They had also brought out the truth that man eats not for enjoyment, but to live, and some of them accordingly suggested and effected in their lives abstention not only from flesh meat but from eggs and milk. Scientifically, some had concluded that man's physical structure showed that he was not meant to be a cooking but a frugivorous animal, that he could take only his mother's milk and, as soon as he had teeth, should begin to take solid foods. Medically, they had suggested the rejection of all spices and condiments. According to the practical and economic argument, they had demonstrated that a vegetarian diet was the least expensive. All these considerations had their effect on me, and I came across vegetarians of all these types in vegetarian restaurants. If one ponders on objects of the sense, there springs attraction. From attraction grows desire. Desire flames to fierce passion. Passion breeds recklessness. Then the memory, all betrayed, lets noble purpose go and saps the mind, till purpose, mind, and man are all undone. When every hope is gone, when helpers fail and comforts flee, I find that help arrives somehow, from I know not where. Supplication, worship, prayer are no superstition. They are acts more real than the acts of eating, drinking, sitting, or walking. The symbol of a court of justice is a pair of scales held evenly by an impartial and blind but sagacious woman. Fate has purposely made her blind in order that she may not judge a person from his exterior, but from his intrinsic worth. The heart's earnest and pure desire is always fulfilled. Renunciation without aversion is not lasting. We alone know our unfortunate condition. We alone know the insults we have to put up with in order that we may possess our wealth and titles. The time has now come to bring these chapters to a close. My life from this point onward has been so public that there is hardly anything about it that people do not know. Moreover, since 1921, I have worked in such close association with the Congress leaders that I can hardly describe any episode in my life since then without referring to my relations with them. For though Shraddhananji, the Deshbandhu, Hakim Sahib, and Lalaji are no more with us today, we have the good luck to have a host of other veteran Congress leaders still living and working in our midst. The history of the Congress since the great changes in it that I have described above is still in the making, and my principal experiments during the past 7 years have all been made through the Congress. A reference to my relations with the leaders would therefore be unavoidable if I set about describing my experiments further, and this I may not do at any rate for the present, if only from a sense of propriety. Lastly, my conclusions from my current experiments can hardly as yet be regarded as decisive. It therefore seems to me to be my plain duty to close this narrative here. In fact, my pen instinctively refuses to proceed further. It is not without a wrench that I have to take leave of the reader. I set high value on my experiments. I do not know whether I have been able to do justice to them. I can only say that I have spared no pains to give a faithful narrative, to describe truth as it has appeared to me, and in the exact manner in which I have arrived at it has been my ceaseless effort. The exercise has given me ineffable mental peace because it has been my fond hope that it might bring faith in truth and ahimsa to waverers. My uniform experience has convinced me that there is no other God than truth, and if every page of these chapters does not proclaim to the reader that the only means for the realization of truth is ahimsa, I shall deem all my labor in writing these chapters to have been in vain. And even though my efforts in this behalf may prove fruitless, let the readers know that the vehicle, not the great principle, is at fault. After all, however sincere my strivings after ahimsa may have been, they have still been imperfect and inadequate. The little fleeting glimpses, therefore, that I have been able to have of truth can hardly convey an idea of the indescribable luster of truth, a million times more intense than that of the sun we daily see with our eyes. In fact, what I have got is only the faintest glimmer of that mighty effulgence, but this much I can say with assurance as a result of all my experiments, that a perfect vision of truth can only follow a complete realization of ahimsa. To see the universal and all-pervading spirit of truth face to face, one must be able to love the meanest of creation as oneself, and a man who aspires after that cannot afford to keep out of any field of life. That is why my devotion to truth has drawn me into the field of politics, and I can say without the slightest hesitation and yet in all humility that those who say that religion has nothing to do with politics do not know what religion means. Identification with everything that lives is impossible without self-purification. Without self-purification, the observance of the law of ahimsa must remain an empty dream. God can never be realized by one who is not pure of heart. Self-purification therefore must mean purification in all the walks of life, and purification being highly infectious, purification of oneself necessarily leads to the purification of one's surroundings. But the path of self-purification is hard and steep. To attain to perfect purity, one has to become absolutely passion-free in thought, speech, and action, to rise above the opposing currents of love and hatred, attachment and repulsion. I know that I have not in me as yet that triple purity in spite of constant ceaseless striving for it. That is why the world's praise fails to move me. Indeed, it very often stings me. To conquer the subtle passion seems to me to be harder far than the physical conquest of the world by the force of arms. Ever since my return to India, I have had experiences of the dormant passions lying hidden within me. The knowledge of them has made me feel humiliated, though not defeated. The experiences and experiments have sustained me and given me great joy, but I know that I have still before me a difficult path to traverse. I must reduce myself to zero. So long as a man does not of his own free will puts himself last among his fellow creatures, there is no salvation for him. Ahimsa is the farthest limit of humility. In bidding farewell to the reader, for the time being at any rate, I ask him to join with me in prayer to the God of truth that he may grant me the boon of ahimsa in mind, word, and deed. Kindly subscribe to my channel.